We'll go ahead and get started. So yep, this is a continuation of our office hours, and today Chris and I are going to be looking at 10 ways that we can get more out of Guardian. Some of these things may be commonly known hacks or um, parts of the tool that but I think a lot of them you'll at least come away from this call with a couple little nuggets of usefulness. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Jake Martin, and I lead the client success team here with Guardian. Been with the team for about 3 years now. It's been super fun. Love working with all my clients. And I'll go ahead and pass it to you, Chris.
Thanks, Jake. Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Schaefer. I'm the Director of Operations here at Guardian. But been a long-time user of Guardian over the years as well. So I've been on both sides of the equation. So happy to present these 10 ways. Thanks, Jake.
Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure if the first statement is correct, but we would like this to be interactive. So maybe we can turn on the mics and mute yourself unless you have a question or want to chime in. But before you do, please use the team's hand raising tool, and we'll do our best to keep an eye on that and let you have the mic. And the chat is actively being monitored by our team. So if you want to chime into that, ask questions, we'll try to get to them as we can, and we'll pin them if we can't and follow back up with you. We'll likely get through the slide, or excuse me, we'll likely get through the 10 tips and tricks with time to spare. So we'll have a pretty much open forum towards the end of the call. So I'm not going to go through this really verbatim, but just so you know how this is structured, I'm going to be taking the first 5. So 1 through 5, I'll go ahead and share out my Revit and go through these things. Then I'll pass it over to Chris, who will go through 6 through 10. We can share this list with the group afterwards.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to add here is each of these are actual time to present this is not that long. So we will ask questions about that given topic kind of live. So if you have a question, please raise your hand or put it in the chat as we go along. And if we feel like we're running out of time, we'll say so and kind of move things along.
Perfect. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and transition to Revit. Get that list actually on my other monitor so I know where I'm headed. All right. All right, so we're going to start really easy with some new features, or at least relative. I think that's one thing that this type of office hours will be really good for. A lot of our clients have been with us since maybe the beginning, maybe a couple years into the development of the product. But a lot of the clients here are going to be pretty new, and so they've adopted Guardian with these features, and they've learned Guardian. They don't know any differently without these features. So I think coming from a more historical perspective, these may have been released and they may have kind of gone under the radar for a lot of us. But the first one is pertaining to Project Central. Super simple. I think one of the most valuable parts of Project Central is the project sessions. So this is going to show historical record of people who have actively been in the file. And it's going to show the start and finish of their session. And the part of this that we think you can get a little bit more out of is the ability to use that session as a filter for the activity feed. So most things are interactive within this timeline, but getting that session information organized as a filter can help you investigate, certain things, um, like failed syncs, what kind of actions were taken. Maybe there's huge transactions that occurred you might want to investigate. This will let you do a little bit more of that forensic BIM management. I'm sure in y'all's files, this is a little bit more interesting than just Chris and I, but um,
You just see the
yeah,
bad things I'm doing right now.
yeah, for sure. Cool. All right. So that one's very simple. Um, but I've noticed that it is a new feature that not a lot of people know that it actually is tied to the activity feed. All right, moving on to number 2, managing annotation properties and additional settings easily and intuitively with Guardian Sync properties. So without Guardian, it's actually quite difficult to manage things like line patterns, line styles, fill patterns within Revit itself. Like we can see these, but we can't actually compare them very easily, like the actual properties and settings of them. And in order to like maybe edit a text style, for example, you actually have to place an instance of that text style and then use your properties palette to go back and forth and change any of those properties. Not to mention you can't actually compare one text style to another very easily. But with the Guardian Sync Properties tool, which is actually a tool used to update or upload standard properties to the cloud, I think a byproduct of this, so even if you're not leveraging it to its full extent by syncing your properties across files, you can use this menu system to simply just manage your system families and properties in a very easy and intuitive way. So for example, let's take a look at the system family types. So this menu can take the place of the additional settings or the annotation tab. Let's take a look at text styles. So these are all of the text styles in my project file right now. I can see which of them are in the cloud, which are not. But really the usefulness of this comes with the selection of multiple at a time. So I can select multiple styles and I can compare them side by side. I can confirm whether or not the name actually matches the properties. And if it doesn't, I can actually make changes here and then apply those changes to the project.
Over the years, I've seen where people have done crazy ways of like overlaying all their different textiles. I've even seen people had like printed charts they hold up and they keep at their desk so they can like, hey, what is our standard? How do we compare? How does this compare? This just makes it easy. Just seeing it all in one place, just understanding all those nuances. Is your width factor set correctly across the board, right? Versus going one by one by one. So makes those simple things even that much easier.
Yeah, exactly. This is honestly probably one of my favorite aspects of Guardian, and it's just kind of a byproduct of the overall tool. All right, number 3. So the next one we're going to talk about is actually for mapping, processing mapping rules. I'm actually going to switch files here to this old file that I affectionately call the Guardian landfill. It is simply just a dumpster of transferring project standards from all over the place. And so if we go to the project properties here, we're going to see a really, really messy menus. The line patterns and the fill patterns especially are just going to be thousands long. And consequently, I have a lot of rules that can be applied to this file. And a very robust mapping configuration is a really good thing, but I think that it's easy to get deterred or intimidated by the fact that you have 1,000 mapping rules and you just want to process 10. So let's go ahead and take a look at line patterns here. So you can see with the mapping rule here, there's quite a few rules simply within this tab itself. So let's say I only want to process my line patterns. This menu up here can help you sort and filter any of these lists. For this example, I want to start from scratch and then only run my line pattern mapping rules. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the mapping rules from this session only. Let's going to hit the pause button on those 1105 rules. So we'll see that change down to 0. And where there was a mapping rule previously, we'll see some brackets indicating that that's temporarily been paused. So you can see I still know which ones have rules applied to them, but they're temporarily inactive. So if I only want to process this tab, I simply have to select one of the properties. I'm going to do a Control A for select all. And then I'm going to use the remove mapping button. In this case, it does the inverse of that because they are already temporarily removed. So if I hit that, we'll see that only those selected will reinstate themselves. So now I only have 42 changes as opposed to 1,100. This is a very good way to take small bites and to actually chip through this stuff without bogging down your machine.
To add to that, I've heard over the years when it comes to project administrators, they're like, oh, I love project properties, but I only have time to go in there like once a month. But when I go in there, there's thousands of things to do and it takes too much time. So this gives them the opportunity to just hit the ones that are critical to the project. Maybe just before the deadline, you find some coming back to textiles that are foreign textiles. Just getting those little things cleaned up go a long way without worrying about maybe materials that really don't impact a project deliverable. Good stuff, Jake.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Chris. All right, moving on to number 4. Go back to my clean project here. Actually, I think it's in this project. Thought I had this all queued up. There it is. It's a door. Why didn't I see that earlier? All right. So the next one has to do with the file specific settings that are protected families in mirror protection. So, these particular tools are file specific, which means if I select a family to be protected from being overwritten, then I'm selecting it in the file that I want to protect it in. That's all fine and dandy. But what if I want to protect that family in any other project it gets inserted into? You can actually bake in these protections for overwrite and mirror into the RFA itself. So I'm going to select this family. I've called it the overwrite protected door family. I'm going to set that to prevent because I don't want anybody changing that. Press OK. And I'm going to save this family out of this project. Just going to save it to my desktop real quick. Now I'm going to come back to this landfill. And just to confirm protected families list here, I only have 3 doors in this project. None of them are protected. But I'll go ahead and insert that overwrite protected door. It's letting me know that I'm not loading from our specified location, but that's okay. This is just a demo. Chris, can you do me a favor and shoot me a one-time password?
Yeah, I'll definitely do that, Jake.
Thanks.
I think Steve is asking me to put it in the actual chat.
Yeah, let's do that.
I don't want anyone on the call stealing my password away from Jake.
All right. So we got that door in here now. If I go back to my protected families, we should see that door in here with that
Oh,
protection already enabled. But this is a really cool way that you can protect your entire library from being overwritten and not actually have to store those in a file. Steve, your question, does the family protection prevent people from changing instance parameters or type properties? No, anything that can be changed from the properties palette in the actual project file will not be affected by this. This is simply protecting the family from being changed within the editor. So the workflow would be, if I open this door family up and I make a change to the actual geometry or to the parameter list and then reload it, it's at that point of reloading that Guardian would actually stop me and offer best practices on what I'm supposed to do here.
one additional thing I'd like to add there is not only will it prevent it from being reloaded from the family editor, but if someone goes to reload it completely from another location. So anything external to that given project.
Yep, exactly. And one thing I often talk about in onboarding calls is in terms of um, strategy and kind of how you paint this feature. We're really not trying to get people, or in my opinion, I'm not trying to scare people away from the family editor. I'm just letting them know that if they're going to make a change to this family, that I'd rather them save it with a new name that's descriptive and unique to the project they're changing it in, and then saving it to a project family folder.
And maybe to provide a little bit more context over this feature is a lot of firms use this, especially for, say, your annotation families. These have been set up, these meet your technical and graphical standards, and you don't want people just opening them up, making changes, and loading them back in. We've all seen this, say a title block, for instance. Someone makes a simple red line that says, change this on the title block, and it's given to someone who's junior. They don't understand how Revit works. They don't understand how the families work and how parameter it might be some project parameters in there or project information parameters that propagate out. They open up the family, they make changes in the family, they think they've got it done right, and they reload it, and next thing you know, every sheet has now been changed, right? So that's really what we're trying to help prevent is those accidental overriding of your standards. And so what to Jake's point, what a lot of firms will do is within the message says, well, if you need to make this unique to the project, just do a save as and add a project specific name to the front of it. So guiding people to the solution and not just saying no.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Chris.
Yep.
So Cody, to answer your question on that, you could simply select those families in your template to protect, and that would actually be baked into the template itself. So moving forward, projects started from that template would inherit those protections. But let's say you don't store door families in your template or whatever families in your template. You can actually load those into a project protect them and then save them back out to your library with those protections baked into the actual family itself. And so from that point, it doesn't matter where those families are inserted to, that protection will be included.
And I also, Sebastian asked in the Q&A, does protecting a family prevent from creating new types? It does not prevent creating new types. So within that given project, the user can modify the instance and type parameters, create new types, rename types as needed.
Cool. Let's move on to number 5. So number 5, I think, is an example of one of those features where if you've been with Guardian for 5+ years, you may not fully be leveraging it, but let's say you got Guardian in the last 6 to 12 months. I kind of see a trend towards firms that I work with that are pretty new. They're really leveraging project groups, whereas kind of legacy firms that got on prior to project groups being an option are kind of late to the game. Not exclusively, but that is a kind of a generalization. At any rate, organizing your files within the projects list by group can be a great way to not only organize this menu and make it easier to see, what models live with what file, or excuse me, what files live within what project. Maybe it's owner groups have their own files, or school districts, or typologies, whatever the situation may be. You can leverage this as a way to organize these files. And the cool part about it is that now that we have the new Backstage dashboard, the project group is actually a data organizational tool. So we can leverage that in Power BI. So you can see here within this highlights page, I can actually sort all of my data by the project group itself. This is only one way that this is leveraged, but moving forward, this technology is going to allow us to automate a lot of organization, especially with project admin, being able to see only those files that are pertinent to them. And then as we move on with our web-based platform and all that cool stuff, this will be a huge component to that. All right. Well, that's the 5 things that I have to share with y'all. I'm going to go ahead and
Maybe
pass it over to you, Chris. But go
maybe
ahead.
before, yeah, cool. Thanks, Jake. Before we get started, we'll just pause for a moment. If you have any questions about this last one with project groups or with any of the others, feel free to raise your hand and we can unmute, or go ahead and add it to the meeting chat. And I'm going to go ahead and, in the meantime, start sharing my screen. All right, cool. Unless I'm missing something now, since I can't see all the information, we'll go ahead and proceed. The next one we're gonna talk about is Project Central, and how now with 3.2 that came out in the fall, how Project Central is available to everyone. But there's a lot of information here. Maybe for a lot of firms, too much information for your users, or information that you may not want to be sharing. Some people could interpret some of the information provided here as sort of negative if people are seeing I guess less than positive things people are doing in the model. But there's a lot of value of sharing a lot of the features and a lot of the information within Project Central in general, and more specifically, sync traffic control. And so what we've done is we've made Project Central available to all users, but then it can be customized of which of these sections can be shown to the end users. And really what we're going to be focusing on today is sync traffic control. So if you come under your settings and go to company settings. It's a live demo. And as you can see here, you have this option, allow users to access Project Central. And go ahead and click yes to turn that on. But then under here, under the cog icon, this is where you can turn on each of those sections. So as we mentioned before, we really want to focus on sync traffic control. In addition, another feature that came out with 3.2 back in the fall is messages. So this is also another great way to get information back and forth to teams. If I go ahead and hit OK, well, we're not going to see anything because I'm an administrator. So let's go ahead and log out. And I'm going to go and log out here. There. Okay, I'm logged out. So as you can see, my Guardian ribbon has reduced down. And if I go ahead and hit Project Central, now I only have information for sync traffic control and messages. So this gives me an opportunity to see where everyone else is, when they've last synced, where they are in the queue. And obviously in this case, Jake and I are currently in the same model. And now one thing to note as an end user, I can remind myself to sync, but I cannot change and force others to sync or remind others to sync. So this is a really handy way of taking advantage of Project Central and giving people sort of an understanding of what's happening here with sync traffic control. And one last thing I want to just remind everyone is you can always move this onto another screen and you can continue to work in Revit. So this is a live dashboard without impeding people's Revit work. All right, so let me log back into Guardian here. Log back in as administrator. Forgot we just with 3.2.7 we have just enacted two-factor identification. And go ahead and close here. Now I'm logged back in. The next thing I want to demonstrate here is how to use, I'm going to make sure I have my notes up here on the left here. The next thing we're going to do is how to use pin protections in a more discrete way. So as you can see here, our grid lines, and if I right click and select all instances in the entire project, we can see all these are pinned. Now, when it comes to a lot of the protections, there's a lot of gradations on what level of protection you want to provide. Coming over here to your project pins dialog and come down to grids, you can see right now everything's set to prevent. For some firms, this might be a little too much. They want to allow users to basically pin and unpin grid lines, make changes as they see fit. But they also want to capture that when people have made those changes. So simply coming over here, changing all these from prevent to monitor will now change the protection mode. This will give you the opportunity to capture when people make changes, but not prevent them to do the work they need to do. In addition, I'm going to unpin all these elements. And this is a nifty little trick here, because now I have, in essence, unpinned everything, unpinned all the grids in the project. Now, in the sake of a live demo, I'm actually going to sync this. And then I'm going to close the model and reopen it. So if you have any questions about pin protections, now is a great time to ask those questions. This should go quick. This is a very small model. I'm going to close out of it. I'm going to reopen it. Just a quick reminder, if you utilize Guardian's Workset Manager, there's an opportunity to remind people to start with the correct active workset. All right, back in it pretty quickly here. And now you can see all these grid lines have been repinned automatically by Guardian. So here we can see I only have the option to unpin. That means they all have been pinned. Come back over to add-ins, check the pins, and you can see that they're pinned. The way this works is under your project configurations is under the cog. You have repin protected elements when opening projects. So again, this is a great way of providing a level of protection, making sure things stay pinned, but not preventing people from unpinning, making those changes. But I would say most importantly, now you have data associated with each of those changes. All right. Anything to add to that, Jake?
No, that was really concise. Good example too.
Great, thank you. All right, the next one we're gonna hit on is sync traffic control. So sync traffic control is a great way of managing syncs with everyone on your team. Jake and I, we work with a lot of users. And one of the things we find, there's a little misconception on what the monitor, guide, and prevent does with sync traffic control. I found a lot of users think that guide means you're not preventing people from syncing, you're just guiding them during the sync process. It's not really the right way to think about it, or the prevent is preventing people from syncing. Again, it's really not the right way to think about it. Really what we are doing is sync traffic control is monitoring for sync conflicts. So guide means if there is a sync conflict identified by Guardian, we're going to guide the user, give them a message that a sync conflict has been identified. But in guide mode, it doesn't prevent the user from actually proceeding with that syncing. So they are more likely to induce a sync conflict, which we're trying to avoid. Our recommendation is, if you are using sync traffic control, is this is one of the features that we do recommend set it to prevent, because the goal here is to prevent the sync conflict, meaning that the user will not sync and induce that conflict with the other user. So let's demonstrate this. So I'm going to go hit OK. I'm going to go hit OK. And let me launch Project Central here. And since I moved over the screen and bring that back, and I'm going to ask Jake to go ahead and start syncing here. And when he starts syncing, I should be able to see that.
Let's see here. First of the live demo might be getting me. Let me try one more thing.
I can see Jake just, it says Jake, oh, Jake left the project now.
I'm going to open it up.
So what I'll do is come down here back to our project configurations here. And if we come over here to our edit message and go to preview, this is what one would see. Oh, Jake's back in the model. Let's head over there. And
all right.
All right, now I can see. Sometimes if you do it instantly the same time. Here you can see that sync conflict with the user. What we recommend is letting people just select add to queue. And now, once Jake is finished syncing, and now I can go ahead and sync. Otherwise, if we set that to guide, the user can go ahead and proceed and enter that sync conflict. All right, moving on to the next one. Close sync or close Project Central. We're going to come back over to our project configurations. And what we're going to do is create a delete protection for sheets. So let's go ahead and create a rule. We're going to call this prevent, name it sheets. And really what we're looking to do is, if we look at our conditions, we can see there's all these different categories. Now, when it comes to some of the system families, what you need to do is select family name. And we'll go ahead and put sheet. And we can also add an additional condition here, say element parameter. And we come down here to yes and no. And we're going to go ahead and select appears in sheet list. Our goal here is the idea is some sheets belong in your drawing set and in your model, and some sheets don't. So what we want to do is we want to allow users to delete sheets that they may have created for whatever reason, but not delete sheets that are part of that set. So if we go ahead and change our protection mode to prevent, let's go ahead and enter, oops. Let's go ahead and enter a command message. Hit OK, OK. The other thing I want to do is one thing we always remind users is when it comes to your rules-based protections, make sure that you order your rules from prevent to guide to mode. Guardian will process these rules from top to bottom. So I'm just going to put this to there and hit OK. So now, if we come over here to, let's just select a random sheet and hit delete. Now you get the protection says the sheet has been selected to be deleted that is listed in the sheet list. So you're asking the user not to delete this sheet. Now, this is what we're trying to prevent here, right? What we're trying to make sure it's okay. Here we can see, here's a sheet, just a random sheet someone created, never did anything with. And over here on the right, we can see appears in the sheet list. And if we go ahead and delete that and hit delete, now that protection doesn't apply because of that simple parameter. So with that being said, Jake, anything to add?
This could be a kind of a good segue to highlight the parameter prompts to get that data filled out in the first place. With the parameter prompts, when a new sheet is created, you can prompt for certain things like, does it appear in a sheet list?
Exactly. So that's a key aspect of Guardian. So sometimes is we protect things or help you provide information on the front end when certain actions are being performed. In this case, creating a sheet, where you'd be asking the user to go ahead and select appears in sheet list. Now, that's going to be the trigger for the delete protection. So something to keep in mind is a lot of Guardian's features kind of work in connection with one another to provide that sort of 360-degree protection. Thanks, Jake.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Chris, one more thing before we move on. There's a question from Mario in the chat. Can we protect views from getting deleted? The answer is yes. And I was curious, Chris, if you might just show a quick rule on how to do that.
Yep. Let's come back over to add-ins and let's go to project configurations or delete protections. So yeah, so if we're going to create a new rule, and in this case, we're going to add a condition. And when it comes to an annotation, and if we say any selected, one little thing to note is if we type in views, we can see views. And so now we've created the rule for views being deleted.
And of course, you can stack other conditions within that statement to specify which types of views should not be deleted.
That's right. That's right. And before we move on to the last one, any last questions? All right, this one's going to be really quick, so no one blink. This is a small but a really helpful feature. Since the office hours is intended for company and project administrators, we assume everyone here on this call is one of those two. So we find sometimes it's helpful to log in and out of Guardian on a regular basis so you can start to test Guardian from that end user perspective. So to help facilitate that, let's go back in here to the admin login. We have the simple little remember me button. So by selecting that, Guardian will remember you each and every time. But at the same time, with two-factor, we will have to enter that information. And I just have to, there we go, enter that new number. All right, I think that concludes our 10 items. So let's, everyone here has any questions, go ahead and put it up. All right, I did see Casey Hoffman. Can MFA be set up with another provider versus email? I will have to take that back to our development team. And looks like Josh answered that pretty quickly. So at this moment in time, yep, not today, but it's something that we can definitely look into. I know, looks like Josh is betting people in the chat here.
Steve asked earlier if there's anything we can't protect from being deleted. I said $5 if you find something. But I don't know if Chris or Jake, you have an actual answer on that. I think using those conditions, we can cover just about everything. Is there anything you found?
Oh, I do. Live sections. I don't know. Maybe we do make this like a little giveaway. What about coordination review warnings? I would assume, Rowan, that you mean from delete protections. Can we protect view templates? We do have, I want to address that one really quickly. Is with some of, under user commands, the way that we can protect view templates is by preventing users from going into the view template initially. Now, one of the things you have to note here is this is a partial protection. This means we can prevent them from going through the ribbon, but not within the view itself. Can you protect types and families from being purged? Jake, you want to take this one?
Yes. The answer is no. And I believe it's a API limitation, but I could be wrong about that. But we'll look into it again and see if there's anything that we're missing. Wait, hold, let me take a step back. We can purge them as admin using the project properties, but I don't think that we can prevent them from being deleted by an end user. Is that correct, Chris?
I believe that's correct. I would say you
Would that
could
be like,
create.
I've heard recently like a request for selecting which properties you can exclude from like purge unused.
Yeah, there has been. Yeah, there has been something along those lines. I'd have to kind of go back through my notes to freshen up on that one.
Mm-hmm.
So the other one here, I did see Patrick prevent dragging elements for and linked models. Let's first address the linked models, and I'll let Jake think about the dragging elements. When it comes to linked models, right, our recommendation there is use a pin protection. And if you do that, then one can't accidentally drag that element. Anything to add on the prevent dragging of elements?
You can select prevent. So that is in the user commands list, there is one called drag elements on selection. And that if you set that to prevent, that prevents the user from toggling the option setting in the lower right-hand side of the Revit menu. So the key would be to configure that probably in a upon installation or the INI file so that that is defaults to disabled, because the protection itself will prevent the user from re-enabling that option.
Nice. That's a good one. The next one down here is revision clouds. I want to say we can do revision clouds. Thought we might have had one made already. And let's just add a condition here, annotation. And so, yeah, you can prevent people from creating revision cloud or deleting revision clouds. I believe we had written a command message for this, basically stating, don't, oh, I know what it was it wasn't to delete revision clouds, it was hiding revision clouds. So, and we had written a command message saying, use the display of revision, this should be managed through the sheet issues and revisions dialog. All right, cool. What other ones do we have here, Jake?
Going quick. Got one from Anne that says, what's the best way to share what rules have been set up with end users? In terms of sharing them, there's a couple options. There's no export from the actual Guardian menu, but we do provide a PowerPoint, an Excel document that has all available protections listed. And typically firms will use that to pre-plan what they're going to start their default with. And so that could be something that is shared with your end users. Also, I've seen firms hold a lunch and learn where they actually go through their settings with the group and kind of be pretty transparent and kind of go through the dialogues and themselves.
Nice. Looking at Cody's,
Really?
what does partial, Jake, or excuse me, Josh, what do you have?
I just spoke up because I think this one is worthy of it. Lee had a question around being notified of users that are disabling the add-in through Revit's add-in manager. And I am aware that one, we have a protection to prevent users from accessing the add-in manager. And also as an admin of your Autodesk account, you can also choose which add-ins users have the ability to control through their add-ins manager. So that's done on the back end of Revit or Autodesk settings. But you can remove Guardian from that list so that users aren't able to disable Guardian. But also in the company settings, we give you the ability to get ahead of it.
So to answer Matthew Salazar's question, in theory, yes. However, we do provide a security certificate that, when deployed prior to the installer itself, silences that prompt. So the move would be to push the security certificate out first and then push the installer. So that will prevent the users from having that option altogether.
Looking at Cody's question, what does partial protection mean? Does it vary per item on that list? Yeah. So within user commands, there is an asterisk next to those ones. As you're aware, with a lot of with a lot of Revit commands, there are many, many different ways in which users can access certain commands. And within the Revit API, not all of them present themselves to third-party apps. And so coming back to view templates is we can see when people open view templates from some avenues, but not all avenues. And so unfortunately, it's just limitations within Revit that we're constrained with. Tom Kemp, can you protect the visible and all view settings in the workset dialog? Currently, at this moment in time, we cannot, unfortunately, but this is something that comes up on a regular basis, and we've added it to our roadmap. So what about protecting changes to shared coordinates and Project True North? All right, Tom, you get a 2 for here. And so a couple ways that one could do this. If we come over to your project configurations, one of the things I like to do is if we go to your location settings, one of my recommendations for all the organizations out there is these are the easy ones to go ahead and set to prevent. Once these are set for a project, they don't need to be changed. If they do need to be changed, it needs to be changed by someone who really knows how these work. So yeah, we recommend setting that. The other thing, the other way of doing this as well is if you look at your project base point, your survey point, and whatnot, there you have the ability to kind of change some of this information as well. You can add a protected pin to these that will prevent those from being modified directly within the model environment. All right, Jake, Josh, there are some that are popping out at you.
We got one for Workset Manager from Henry. Will Guardian be able to prevent users from putting objects onto worksets? So Guardian's Workset Manager does a lot of things, and one of them is automatically placing elements onto specific worksets using rules and filters that you can create. But with those same rules and filters, you can basically use them to do the opposite. So if the item or the element doesn't match the rules, then Guardian will actually prevent that from being placed there, and then notify the user that it doesn't belong there, ask them to pick the correct workset to place it onto, and then that workset becomes active moving forward, optionally.
I'm doing my best to keep up with all these.
A plug for the YouTube there from Margarito.
Oh, nice.
Yes, go like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Smash that like button.
Another shameless plug here is if you are a Pinnacle customer, all of our how-to videos are now available on Pinnacle as well. All right. I think we may have. Here's a good one. Will Guardian be able to prevent users to put objects into work sets or work set? Yeah. So this is where the work set manager really shines. So for instance, if we come over here to the Guardian standard work sets, if we select levels and grids, here you can see we have a rule that will assign levels and grids. Scroll down here automatically to the levels and grids work set. Now in this case, only allow elements that match these rules is selected. That means if I go ahead and come over here, change my work set to, oh, sorry, the one that I just showed here. Let's see if I can go and select the correct one. I should have paid attention to which one is assigned. Okay. It looks like we assign this to the project. Oh, this is the correct one. Okay, this is the one assigned to the project. Okay. Now that I'm flipping everything around.
I don't think that one had a rule with it, Chris.
Oh, didn't? Okay.
Mm-mm.
This is what happens when live demonstration here. We'll make it work really quickly, hopefully.
Oh, it did. My bad.
Let's just double check. Okay. Now we have QA levels and grids. And now let's create a wall. Actually, let's not create a wall because I think it may already have another. Let's just place window. Oh, we have a rule that's already.
Oh, that's the catch. If you have a rule that automatically places it, it's going to do it for you in the background, right?
And so, yes, you can do this.
Place a urinal, Chris.
Yeah, you can do this to kind of lock out the work sets. But it's one of those things where you want to make sure when you're setting up your project, you have the correct work set assigned, then you have your work set or your work sets assigned, and so on and so forth, right? So sometimes doing this on the fly doesn't work automatically. So we were just moving things around quite quickly there. All right. Oh, sorry, Josh. I saw that you answered that. Cringe work sets aren't layers. All right, cool. Jake, anything else?
There's one last question regarding the workset manager from Cody. Do workset rules in the Guardian workset manager apply separately from the project configurations? Run workset rules automatically if that is disabled? That's a good question. I believe if that checkbox in the project configurations is enabled, it's governing all rules.
Oh,
if that's disabled, it's rule by rule because that option, or it's workset by workset at that point because that option is unique to the workset selected.
Yep. So, yeah, so this is a really important point here, and that's the reason why the demo that I just didn't work here, because we in this project configuration run workset rules automatically was deselected, meaning those automations don't happen. But the goal with that is some firms don't want that automation applied. And what they would prefer to do is at some point later in time, go back and run these rules manually. So if we do this, Guardian will scan the project looking for everything that matches those rules, and at that point, place everything on the correct work set. This is where some of you may be thinking, why would I want this? I just want things automatically go in there. So what a lot of firms will actually do is, say if you're utilizing a client standards. And it isn't actually advantageous to use client standards during a project. Sometimes when you kind of think about this, right, getting everyone to learn a client standards just to design a building for them is an additional learning curve for everyone on that project. But what if you just followed your own standards, then at the deliverable, kind of run Guardian in reverse, and you convert everything from your standards to the client standards, say more specifically to work sets, where hypothetically you can start placing everything automatically onto those correct work sets before per their work set rules, and not maybe the ones that you use throughout your firm. So something to think about. Cool. Now we went a little over, but Jake, want to wrap it up for us?
Yeah. So thanks everybody for coming out and joining us. This was a lot of fun. We'll review the questions and see if there's any that we missed. But if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to myself, Chris, or Josh, or the Teams channel. If you're in this meeting and you're not part of the Teams channel, or that sounds unfamiliar to you, drop your name in the chat and I'll do my best to get you added. But other than that, thanks for coming out. It was a real pleasure, and we'll see you next time.